The program originally was put together back in the late 90s. At that time in Michigan, there was a lot of movement into the countryside from people who did not have an agricultural background, not, in many cases, not even a grandparent who had a farm. So people moved into the country. It was beautiful. And then they noticed that farms had some odor associated with them. And they weren't familiar with farming practices. At the same time, there was a lot of conversation about additional regulations for farms. So livestock was a real visible place.
At the time, the premise of the Environmental Assurance Program was to create an opportunity for farmers to get ahead of things. A lot of regulations were coming down the pipe. We were struggling, especially at the livestock industry at the national level. EPA was introducing new regulations. We were really fighting to understand how do we help our folks get ahead, and how do you do so in a way that makes sense to them. So in 2000, we split apart MAEAP into different systems so that primarily so we could focus on the livestock system first. We eventually grew the cropping system and then the farmstead system. We had great tools and great mentors to build those from. The farmstead system came from the pharmacist program. Alan Krzyk from MSU Extension led that for so long. The cropping system, many of the crop partners around the table, the corn marketing program, soybeans, had great things in place already. If we didn't have to build anything from scratch, we ripped it off and duplicated it from other places.
Dave Cheney was an early adopter and stayed with the program after leaving the pork industry.
Well, I think at the time we didn't really have a quality assurance program in place for your everyday farm. And I just felt it was something that needed to be done. And if it's going to move and progress through the farm community, somebody had to be one of the first ones to do it. And, you know, take a few arrows to make sure people in the end can hang on to the land. And so I felt it was a good program. So we signed up and went through the process of getting verified, and here we are, I don't know, 9 or 10 years later.
Now, when that risk assessment was built, Michigan had and continues to have a very strong right to farm program, as well as it's a water state, so a lot of environmental laws. Farmers ask something that was pretty difficult, and I'm sure remains difficult, that all state and federal agencies be on the same page, so that if a farmer made a change on their farm, that another agency wouldn't come along and say, well, you didn't do that right, or you need also to do this. So that comprehensive nature of the program took quite a long time to get everyone's buy-in into that. And the verification then made sure that all of those pertinent state and federal laws in right to farm, generally accepted agricultural and management practices, or we call them the GAMPs, were actually being addressed appropriately for that farm location at the time of the inspection.
Thank you very much for everything you do. And this certificate says that the Michigan Agricultural Environmental Assurance Program recognizes and congratulates Lee Farm. You're the 1,000th MAEAP verification livestock farmstead and cropping system, October 17th of 2011. Thanks for all you do.
Despite the early adopters, farmers had reservations about a voluntary program, and the partners encouraged legislators to make MAEAP a permanent part of the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development.
How do you invest in something that you don't know if it's going to be around tomorrow? So we invested in the legislature in Michigan in helping our folks to understand why it was important we wanted MAEAP to be around. Why am I going to go through a program if this is just a fly-by-night that's going to go away?
Because our ag community is a critical part of our state. It's one of our largest industries. It's one of our greatest opportunities. And it was one of the areas that supported us over this last decade of really tough times. So to have something like this happen today is just wonderful in terms of being proactive and thinking about how we can be environmentally responsible, planning for the future, and rewarding success for people that are doing best practices.
When MAEAP was codified in 2010 as PA 1 and 2 on behalf of Governor Snyder, it gave an understanding of certainty to farmers. The program was going to be around, and we built incentives into that said if you're doing what you're supposed to, you're going to be okay. Whether it's fines if you've had a spill, or if new regulations to manage watersheds came down the pipe, would you be in the best position that you could be? That's what the legislation offered.
Today, there are 5,000 and counting verifications on Michigan farms in the livestock, cropping, farmstead, and the forest, wetland, and habitat systems. The only voluntary environmental assurance program in the country.
We believe so much in this program and how it's helped our farm and how it benefits not only us but our neighbors and our land too, that we make sure it's included in every tour that we do. And the whole time we're talking about how and all the steps that we went through, and we have a little story that goes along with everything. So like our lake shape pit, you know, we had to totally redesign and reline and re-engineer that whole pit so that it met the specifications of the MAEAP program so that we would make sure our water was safe. And then we go through how we had to make a fertilizer containment area to make sure that we would be proactive and make sure that none of the fertilizer or any chemicals would get spilled into the soil. So we're protecting the water, we're protecting the soil.
You know, the bottom line is still the environment and what we need to do to protect our environment. But I think from my side, from my perspective as a cash crop farmer, I want MAEAP to be there and to be evolving and to be ahead of the game for when it comes to the Lake Erie Basin, to become the program, the model for the other states that we're out in front and saying this is what we're doing to mitigate, to keep these things from happening, and suggest to, you know, to maybe to those lawmakers and the legislators, this is what we're doing, these are the steps that we're taking in agriculture to do this, before they come out and say, no, this is what you're going to do.
The future I see for the MAEAP program is, number one, to continue getting more farms working toward MAEAP verification and achieving MAEAP verification. But to do that, we've got to provide the value that they need out of that program. So that's where I really see the future of the program going, is trying to find ways that farmers can find value in doing all of that work and working with the technicians and being verified. And you know, it's scary to invite government people to come out and inspect your farm, but that's part of the process. And so we want to make sure that it's worth it to them, that they feel like they've gotten something for it. So whether that's better alignment with corporate and national sustainability programs, or whether it's for better ability to report your environmental benefits like controlling sediment and nutrients on your farm and being able to use those as a, you know, as a demonstration of your good performance on your farm. We want to make sure that farmers want to be MAEAP verified, that they think that it's worth it once they've done it, because obviously once they're verified, we want them to stay verified and to keep getting re-verified.